7 new airport rules in 2026 catching travelers off guard. Airport travel in 2026 is not just getting busier. It is getting stricter, more digital, and less forgiving of old travel habits. A lot of passengers still assume the usual airport problems are things like long lines, delays, and expensive food. But the bigger issue now is that several airport and border rules have changed in ways that can stop a trip before boarding even begins. From stricter ID enforcement in the US to new digital travel permissions for Europe and the UK, travelers are being caught off guard because they are showing up with outdated assumptions. Battery rules are also being enforced more seriously, and even familiar checkpoint rules like liquids still matter. The biggest mistake in 2026 is thinking, "I've flown before, so I already know how this works." Airports are changing faster than many people realize. Here are 7 major airport rules in 2026 that are catching travelers off guard. 1. Real ID is now fully affecting domestic U.S. flights. One of the biggest surprises for travelers in 2026 is that Real ID is no longer something you can keep putting off. TSA says that since May 7, 2025, state-issued IDs that are not Real ID compliant are no longer accepted for domestic air travel if that is the only ID you bring. A lot of people still arrive at the airport assuming their regular driver's license will work like before, only to face serious trouble at security. This rule is catching people off guard because it affects everyday domestic trips, not just international travel. Some passengers think they will get a warning or be allowed through anyway, but that is a dangerous assumption. If your license is not compliant, you need another accepted document such as a passport. In 2026, one of the easiest ways to ruin your trip is to arrive with an ID that used to work, but no longer does. 2. TSA now has a paid backup identity process if you show up without proper ID. Another new rule catching travelers off guard is TSA Confirm ID. TSA announced that from February 1, 2026, passengers who do not present acceptable identification may be referred to this process, and TSA has also said there is a fee attached to it. This is important because some travelers still think forgetting proper ID is something they can talk their way through with enough explanation. That old mindset is becoming much riskier. The airport experience is now moving toward more formal, system-based identity verification instead of case-by-case flexibility. Even if Confirm ID may help certain travelers avoid missing a trip completely, it should not be treated like a casual backup plan. It adds cost, uncertainty, and extra processing at a moment when most people are already under stress. In practical terms, 2026 airports are sending a clear message: showing up without accepted ID is no longer a small mistake. It can become an expensive and trip-threatening problem very quickly. 3. Face-based airport screening is expanding much more than travelers expected. A lot of travelers are also being caught off guard by how quickly facial recognition-style screening is spreading. TSA says its pre-check touchless ID program is now available at 65 airports. That means more passengers are moving through airport identity checks in a more biometric and less document-heavy way than before. For frequent travelers, this can make the airport experience faster and smoother, but for others, it feels like a major change in how travel works. The important point is not that your passport or ID disappears. It is that your face is increasingly becoming part of the airport verification process. Travelers who still think airport identity checks are only about handing over a document are behind the curve. In 2026, airports are clearly becoming more automated, more digital, and more contactless. That shift is catching people off guard because it changes not just what you carry, but how you move through the terminal, from security to boarding. 4. Europe's new entry/exit system is changing airport arrivals and border lines. For travelers going to Europe, one of the biggest 2026 changes is the EU entry/exit system, or EES. The European Commission says this system became fully operational on April 10, 2026. Instead of relying on traditional passport stamping for many short-stay non-EU visitors, the system records entries and exits digitally and uses biometric data such as facial images and fingerprints. This is catching travelers off guard because many people still expect the old airport arrival routine, where a quick stamp is the main step. Now the process is becoming more digital, more trackable, and in some cases slower or unfamiliar for first-time users. It also means your time in the Schengen area is being monitored more consistently through electronic records. In practical terms, the airport border experience in Europe is no longer just a passport and stamp moment. It is increasingly a biometric border event, and many travelers are only discovering that when they land. 5. ETIAS is coming later in 2026, and many travelers still do not realize it. Another major rule that will catch people off guard in 2026 is ETIAS. The EU's official ETIAS site says it will start operations in the last quarter of 2026. This matters because many visa-exempt travelers still think a passport alone will be enough to board for Europe. ETIAS changes that by adding a pre-travel authorization requirement for many people heading to European destinations. The big reason this will surprise travelers is that the problem may happen before departure, not after arrival. Airlines check documents before boarding, so someone without the required authorization may be stopped at the airport desk or gate rather than sorted out later. That is a big psychological change in travel. Europe is moving toward a more pre-cleared system, and passengers who have grown used to easy, visa-free trips may suddenly discover there is now an extra digital step. In 2026, that kind of rule change can absolutely catch unprepared travelers off guard. 6. The UK's ETA system is now blocking some trips before boarding. The UK is also catching travelers off guard with its Electronic Travel Authorization, or ETA system. The UK government says an ETA is now required for many visitors who are traveling without a visa for short stays, and the official guidance says it costs £20. The government also made clear that from February 2026, some visitors would not be able to travel to the UK without advance permission. This is a big airport rule change because it shifts part of immigration control to the check-in stage. Travelers who assume they can sort things out after landing may instead be denied boarding before the trip even begins. That is especially important for passengers flying to the UK from countries whose citizens are used to easier short-visit entry. In 2026, the airport is no longer just checking your passport. It is increasingly checking whether your digital permission to travel exists before the plane ever leaves the ground. 7. Battery and charging rules are being taken more seriously than many travelers think. One more rule, catching travelers off guard in 2026, involves batteries, power banks, and vapes. FAA guidance says spare lithium batteries and power banks must be carried in carry-on baggage only, and if a carry-on bag is checked at the gate, those items must be removed and kept in the cabin. FAA also says larger lithium-ion batteries between 100 watt-hours and 160 watt-hours require airline approval, and anything over 160 watt-hours is prohibited. TSA separately says electronic cigarettes and vaping devices are allowed only in carry-on baggage. This matters because many travelers still pack these items carelessly, especially portable chargers. Airports and airlines are paying close attention because lithium batteries can overheat and become fire risks. So one of the biggest practical airport rules in 2026 is simple. If it has a lithium battery, you need to know exactly where it belongs and whether it is allowed at all. The real story of airport travel in 2026 is that the rules are becoming stricter before you even reach the plane. Airports are more digital, more biometric, and more focused on advanced compliance than many travelers realize. That is why people are being caught off guard. They are not failing because they forgot how to fly. They are failing because the system has changed around them. Real ID, paid identity verification, biometric screening, Europe's ETIAS, the UK's ETA system, and stricter battery rules all show the same trend. Airports now expect you to arrive already prepared, already documented, and already compliant. In 2026, the traveler who assumes everything works like it used to is the one most likely to face trouble. The smartest traveler now is the one who checks the rules before leaving home, not after reaching the airport.